My name is Alan and I am 59 years old. I'm sitting in my living room right now, looking down at a $3.9 million sale contract in my hands. My son Brandon just called me. He said, "We are moving in tomorrow, Dad." I smiled. I did not panic. I did not argue. I just smiled and agreed to meet him. You see, Brandon thinks I'm an old fool who does not know what is happening. But I have been planning this moment for weeks. Have you ever been underestimated by people who should know you best? Let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. And before I tell you what happened when Brandon showed up, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you do not want to miss this. I was born in Sacramento, California back in 1966. My parents were simple folks. My father worked at a hardware store and my mother was a seamstress. We never had much, but we had enough. I learned early on that if you wanted something in life, you had to work for it. Nobody was going to hand you anything. I studied engineering at UC Davis. It was not easy paying for college, but I worked part-time jobs and took out loans. After graduation, I became a construction engineer specializing in designing high-end residential homes. For over 30 years, I built my reputation one project at a time. People in the industry knew me as someone who paid attention to every detail. I never cut corners. I never compromised on quality. That was my code. By the time I was 55, I had saved enough to retire comfortably. I was proud of what I had accomplished. Every dollar I earned came from honest work and dedication. I thought I had raised my son to value the same principles. I was wrong about that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Margaret. I met her in 1987 at an architecture exhibition in San Francisco. She was standing in front of a painting of the Pacific Ocean. Her head tilted slightly as she studied the brushstrokes. She had this way of looking at art like she was having a private conversation with it. I stood there watching her for a good 5 minutes before I finally worked up the courage to say hello. Margaret was an artist. She painted seascapes and coastal landscapes. Her work captured something that photographs could never quite get right. There was emotion in her paintings. You could feel the salt air and hear the waves just by looking at them. We fell in love quickly. She told me later that she loved my steadiness. In a world full of people chasing trends and trying to impress others, she said I was refreshingly genuine. I just knew what I wanted and went after it without making a fuss. That was how she described me anyway. We got married in 1988. It was a small ceremony on a beach near Santa Cruz, just 40 people. Margaret wore a simple white dress and the wind kept blowing her hair across her face. She laughed through half the ceremony. It was the happiest day of my life. For years, Margaret talked about her dream of living in a house overlooking the ocean. She wanted to wake up every morning and see the water stretching out to the horizon. She wanted a studio with big windows where she could paint while listening to the waves. In 2010, I finally made her dream come true. I found a piece of land in Carmel by the sea, right on the coast. It was expensive, but I'd been saving for years. I designed the house myself, working nights and weekends on the blueprints. It took 2 years to build. 3 stories modern architecture blended with classic elements, a wall of windows facing the Pacific. On the 3rd floor, I built Margaret her studio, floor-to-ceiling glass, natural light flooding in from every angle. When I showed it to her for the first time, she cried. She stood in that empty room and sobbed like a child. Those were the best years of our marriage. Margaret painted masterpieces in that studio. Some of her most celebrated works were created right there with the ocean as her backdrop. We would sit on the deck every evening watching the sunset, not saying much. We did not need words anymore. After 30 years together, we could communicate in silence. Then the cancer came. Margaret was diagnosed with breast cancer 4 years ago. By the time they found it, the disease had already spread. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 8. Those final months were hard, but she never complained. She kept painting until her hands were too weak to hold the brush. On her last night, she held my hand and made me promise something. "Keep this house, Alan," she whispered. "It is our soul. Promise me." I promised. She passed away the next morning just as the sun was rising over the water. I like to think she saw it one last time before she went. The house is worth $3.9 million now. The location, the design, the views. Real estate agents call me every few months asking if I want to sell. I always say no. This house is not about money to me. It never was. Now let me tell you about Brandon. He was born in 1991, our only child. Margaret and I poured everything we had into raising him. We gave him love opportunities and a stable home. But even when he was young, I noticed things that worried me. Brandon was smart, very smart, but he had a tendency to compare himself to others. If his friend had a new bicycle, Brandon wanted a better one. If a classmate went on vacation to Hawaii, Brandon would sulk because we only went camping. No matter what we gave him, it was never quite enough. Margaret was softer with him than I would have been. She believed in nurturing rather than discipline. I tried to teach Brandon about the value of hard work, about earning things instead of expecting them. But he was more interested in results than process. He wanted the prize without the struggle. Still, he did well in school. He got into medical school and became a surgeon. I was proud of him. A doctor in the family. Margaret and I attended his graduation ceremony, beaming like all the other parents. But somewhere along the way, I lost my son. I just did not realize it until much later. I look at the painting Margaret made hanging above the fireplace. It shows 3 figures on a beach at sunset, a man, a woman, and a small boy. She painted it when Brandon was 10 years old. We were so happy then. I wonder now where that boy went. How did he turn into the man who would threaten to take everything from me? Brandon met Stephanie 6 years ago at a hospital fundraising gala. She was a real estate lawyer, sharp and ambitious, with the kind of confidence that fills a room. Her family came from money, old Beverly Hills wealth, country clubs and summer houses and all that. I met her for the first time at a dinner Brandon arranged. She was polite enough, but I could tell she was sizing me up, evaluating me like a piece of property she was considering buying. I did not like the way she looked around our house, mentally appraising everything. They got married after a year of dating. The wedding was enormous. Stephanie's family paid for everything, which meant they controlled everything. It was held at a resort in Napa Valley. 300 guests, most of whom I had never met. Margaret and I sat at our table feeling like strangers at someone else's party. After the wedding, things started to change. When Margaret was still alive, Brandon and Stephanie visited fairly often, maybe once a month, sometimes more. They would stay for the weekend, and Stephanie would spend most of her time complaining about the drive from Los Angeles. "It is so far from everything," she would say, looking out at the ocean like it personally offended her. "I do not know how you stand living out here." Margaret would just smile and change the subject. She never argued with Stephanie. She told me privately that she did not want to create tension between Brandon and his father. After Margaret died, the visits became less frequent. Brandon always had excuses. Work was busy. The kids had activities. Stephanie was not feeling well. The reasons piled up like leaves in autumn until months would pass without a single visit. I understood that they had their own lives, but what hurt me most was losing time with my grandchildren. Emma was 7 now. Lucas was 5. They were beautiful children. Emma had Margaret's eyes, that same curious sparkle when she looked at something interesting. Lucas was quiet or thoughtful, always watching everything. When they did visit, they loved playing on the beach, building sandcastles, chasing waves. Emma would beg me to tell her stories about Grandma, but Stephanie started limiting those visits. She said the drive was too hard on the children. She said they needed structure and routine. She said a lot of things that sounded reasonable on the surface, but felt like excuses underneath. I tried not to push. I did not want to be one of those fathers who causes problems in his son's marriage, so I stayed quiet and hoped things would improve. They did not. About 6 months ago, something shifted. Stephanie started asking questions about my house. Not casual questions, specific ones, legal ones. "Dad, do you have all your property documents organized?" she asked one Sunday over the phone. "I could help you put together a file, make sure everything is in order." I told her I had everything handled. She didn't seem satisfied with that answer. A few weeks later, Brandon called with a similar line. "Dad, you're getting older. Managing a property like that is a lot of work. Maybe you should let someone younger help you with the finances." I told him I was fine. I had been managing my own affairs for nearly 60 years. I did not need help. But they kept pushing. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the house, the value of the property, the cost of maintenance, the burden of ownership. Then, one afternoon, I overheard something I was not supposed to hear. I was visiting them in Los Angeles for Lucas's birthday. Stephanie was in the kitchen talking on her phone. She did not know I was in the hallway. "That beach house is worth almost $4 million, she said, laughing. "Once the old man signs it over, we can flip it or rent it out. Either way, it is free money." Free money. That is what she called my home. The house I built with my own hands. The house where Margaret painted her final masterpieces. The house where she took her last breath. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding. Then I quietly walked away, pretending I had heard nothing. But I heard everything, and I started watching more carefully after that. 2 weeks ago, Brandon and Stephanie drove up to Carmel unannounced. They said they wanted to talk about something important. I invited them in, made coffee, sat down in the living room. That is when they presented me with a stack of legal documents. Stephanie did most of the talking. She had clearly prepared a script. "Dad, we have been thinking about your situation." She began, her voice smooth and practiced. "You are 59 years old. This property requires significant upkeep. The market is strong right now, which means the value is at its peak. We think it is time you transferred ownership to us." I looked at the papers. Power of attorney, property transfer forms, all neatly organized with little colored tabs showing where to sign. "I'm not signing anything," I said calmly. "I promised Margaret I would keep this house." Brandon leaned forward. "Mom is gone, Dad. You need to be practical about this." Practical. My dead wife's final wish was impractical to him. "I am being practical," I replied. "I'm keeping my home." That is when Stephanie's mask slipped. "Alan, let me be direct with you," she said, and her voice had an edge now. "If you refuse to cooperate with this reasonable request, we are going to have to reconsider your relationship with Emma and Lucas." I stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that it is not healthy for the children to spend time with someone who cannot make rational decisions. If you insist on being difficult, we may need to limit your contact with your grandchildren for their own well-being." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Brandon said nothing. He just sat there, letting his wife threaten his father with the loss of his grandchildren. "You have 1 week to think about it," Stephanie continued, standing up. "We expect you to make the right choice." They left without saying goodbye. I sat alone in my living room for hours after that. The house felt emptier than it ever had. I looked at the photographs on the shelf, Emma and Lucas grinning at the camera, Brandon as a baby in Margaret's arms, our wedding day. My own son had just threatened to take my grandchildren away unless I gave him my home. I should have been devastated, and I was for a while. But as the night wore on, something else began to grow inside me. Not anger exactly, something colder, more focused. If they wanted to play games, I would show them how the game was really played. I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 in the morning, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cold under my feet. The moon hung low over the water, casting silver light across the waves. I thought about Margaret. I thought about what she would want me to do. She had known even before I did that Brandon had problems. I remembered a conversation we had a few years before she got sick. She had said, "Our son has a good heart somewhere deep inside, but he got lost along the way. I just hope he finds his way back before it is too late." At the time, I thought she was being too harsh. Now I understood she had seen something I refused to see. But Margaret had also taught me something else. She believed in second chances. She believed that people could change if they truly wanted to. She would not want me to destroy my relationship with Brandon, but she also would not want me to be a victim. I needed a plan, something smart, something that protected me and the house but still left a door open for Brandon if he ever decided to walk through it. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I called Harold Fletcher at 8 o'clock that morning. Harold was 67 years old, a lawyer I had known since college. We had lived in the same dormitory freshman year. He went on to law school while I studied engineering, but we stayed friends for over 40 years. He was one of the few people I trusted completely. "Alan, it has been too long," he said when he answered. "How are you holding up?" "Not great, Harold. I need your help." I told him everything. The threats, the ultimatum, the documents they wanted me to sign. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Those vultures," Harold finally said. "Stephanie knows exactly what she is doing, using her legal expertise to pressure her own father-in-law." "What are my options, Ho?" I asked. Harold explained the situation clearly. Brandon and Stephanie had no legal claim to my house. The property was in my name alone. The threat to cut off contact with my grandchildren was legally questionable and potentially constituted emotional manipulation. "You could fight them in court if they try anything," Harold said, "but that would be expensive and ugly." "Is that what you want?" "No," I said. "I do not want a war. I want to protect myself without destroying what is left of my family." "Then what are you thinking?" I told him my idea. What if I sold the house to someone I trusted? Someone who would let me stay here until I died. A life estate arrangement. Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. "You old fox," he said. That is actually brilliant. They cannot take what you do not own anymore, but you would still have the right to live there for the rest of your life. Exactly. But I need to find the right buyer. That evening, Harold came to the house. We sat in my study with a pot of coffee and started going through possibilities. I needed someone who loved this house as much as Margaret had, someone who would preserve it, not flip it for profit, someone I could trust absolutely. Then it hit me. Diane Morrison, Margaret's niece. Diane was 38 years old, an architect based in Seattle. Her mother, Margaret's younger sister, had died when Diane was only 12. After that, Margaret had treated Diane like a daughter. Diane spent summers with us throughout her teenage years. She knew every corner of this house. She had watched Margaret paint in the studio countless times. Even after Margaret passed, Diane stayed in touch with me. She called every few weeks just to check in. She sent flowers on Margaret's birthday. She was the kind of person Margaret would have wanted to inherit this place. I called her the next morning. "Uncle Alan," she answered warmly. "What a nice surprise. How are you?" I told her everything, the whole ugly story. When I mentioned Brandon's threats, Diane gasped. "I cannot believe it," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Aunt Margaret would be heartbroken. She loved Brandon so much despite everything." "I know, but I need to protect myself, Diane, and I need to protect this house." Then I made my proposal. I would sell her the house at full market value, $3.9 million. In return, she would grant me a life estate, allowing me to live here until I passed away. After that, the house would be fully hers. Diane did not hesitate. "Yes," she said immediately. "Absolutely yes. I will keep Aunt Margaret's studio exactly the way it is, and you will always have a home there, Uncle Alan, for as long as you need it." We worked fast. Harold drew up the contracts. Diane flew down from Seattle 3 days later to sign the papers. Everything was handled properly and legally. The transaction was recorded. The deed was transferred. By the end of that week, I no longer owned my house. On paper, it belonged to Diane Morrison. But I still lived there. I still woke up every morning to the sound of waves. I still sat in Margaret's studio and looked at her unfinished painting. Nothing changed for me except one crucial thing. Brandon and Stephanie could not touch it anymore. The $3.9 million from the sale went into a new account. I had plans for that money, but those could wait. First, I had to deal with my son. The deadline Brandon had given me was approaching. I had 1 day left to decide. On that final evening, my phone rang. It was Brandon. "Dad," he said, his voice dripping with false confidence, "we have made our decision. Stephanie and I are moving into the house tomorrow. You clearly cannot handle the responsibility anymore, so we are taking over." I almost laughed. Moving in tomorrow, like I was some senile old man who could not stop them. "Moving in," I repeated calmly. "Yes. We will arrive in the morning. Have your things ready." I let the silence stretch for a moment. Then I spoke. "All right, son. Why do not you and Stephanie come over tomorrow morning? I have something to show you." Brandon sounded surprised. "You are agreeing? Just come. We will talk." After I hung up, I walked over to the coffee table where the sale contract sat in a manila envelope. I picked it up, feeling its weight. Tomorrow would be interesting. I woke before dawn on the day Brandon was supposed to arrive. The sky was still dark, but the eastern horizon showed the faintest hint of pink. I put on a pot of coffee and walked down to the beach. The sand was cool and damp from the night air. I stood at the edge of the water, letting the waves wash over my feet. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon, the sun was preparing to rise. I thought about all the mornings Margaret and I had stood in this exact spot, watching the sunrise together, not talking, just being. Those quiet moments were worth more than any amount of money. "Today is the day, my love," I whispered to the empty beach. "Wish me luck." I went back inside, showered and dressed in comfortable clothes. Nothing fancy. I was not trying to impress anyone. Around 7:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was Harold. He came through the front door carrying a leather briefcase. His face was serious, but calm. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I will ever be." Harold set up in my study, organizing all the legal documents we might need. Every piece of paper was in order, every signature verified, every detail perfect. At 8:15, another car arrived. Diane stepped out, looking both nervous and determined. She hugged me tightly. "I'm here, Uncle Alan. Whatever happens, I'm right here." I asked her to wait in the guest room adjacent to the living room. The door was solid oak, so Brandon would not know she was there, not until the right moment. At exactly 9 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Through the window, I watched Brandon's black SUV roll up the driveway. He parked directly in front of the main entrance like he already owned the place. Brandon stepped out first. He was wearing an expensive charcoal gray suit, his hair freshly cut, his posture radiating confidence. He looked like a man about to close a business deal. Stephanie emerged from the passenger side. She wore a cream-colored blazer and carried a thick leather folder under her arm. Her heels clicked against the stone pathway as she approached. Her smile was the smile of someone who believed she had already won. I noticed they had not brought Emma and Lucas. They did not want the children to witness what they were about to do to their grandfather. I opened the front door before they could ring the bell. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "Come in." Brandon strode past me without a word, his eyes scanning the interior like he was already mentally redecorating. Stephanie followed her gaze, sharp and calculating. "Nice day to start fresh, Dad," Brandon said, settling onto the leather sofa in the living room. Stephanie sat beside him, opening her folder and spreading documents across the coffee table. "I have prepared all the paperwork," she announced crisply. "This will be quick and painless, just a few signatures and we can begin the transition." I remained standing, my arms relaxed at my sides. "Would you like some coffee first?" I offered. Brandon waved his hand dismissively. "No time for that, Dad. Let us get this done. Where do I sign?" I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Searching for any trace of the boy I had raised, the boy who used to run along this beach laughing as the waves chased him, the boy Margaret had cradled in her arms and sung lullabies to. I could not find him. All I saw was a stranger in an expensive suit. "Before we do anything," I said slowly, "I want to ask you something, Brandon." He sighed impatiently. "What? Do you remember what your mother said about this house?" Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Mom loved this place, I know that. But she is gone, Dad. We need to move on." Stephanie cut in, her voice sharp. "Alan, let us not get emotional about this. It is a business decision, nothing more." I turned to face her directly. "Is that what this is, just business?" "Of course, this property is a valuable asset that you are not utilizing efficiently. Brandon and I can maximize its potential by selling it or renting it out as a vacation home." Stephanie's eyes flickered with surprise. She had not expected me to know her plans. "By making smart financial decisions," she said carefully. "Decisions you are clearly not capable of making on your own anymore." "Is that so?" "Alan, I'm trying to be patient here, but you need to accept reality. You are almost 60 years old. You live alone in a house worth nearly $4 million. That is not responsible asset management. That is sentimentality clouding judgment." I nodded slowly as if considering her words. "And the threat to keep my grandchildren away from me, was that just business too?" Brandon finally spoke up. "We had to make you see reason, Dad. You were not listening." "I was listening. I just was not agreeing." Stephanie stood up abruptly. "This is pointless. Alan, either you sign these documents right now or we proceed with our alternative plan." "Which is?" "We petition the court to have you declared mentally incompetent. I have already spoken with a psychiatrist who will support our case. You are clearly unable to make rational decisions about your own welfare." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My own son was threatening to have me declared insane so he could steal my house. I let the silence stretch for several seconds. Then I walked over to my desk. "You know what?" I said calmly. "You are right. This has gone on long enough." Brandon and Stephanie exchanged triumphant glances. They thought they had broken me. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the manila envelope. I walked back to the coffee table and placed it in front of them. "You want this house?" I said. "Here is what you need to see." Brandon grabbed the envelope eagerly. He tore it open and pulled out the documents inside. His face changed as he read the first page. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands began to shake. Stephanie leaned over to read alongside him. Her confident expression crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a wave. "What is this?" Brandon breathed. I sat down in my armchair, crossing my legs casually. "It is exactly what it looks like, son. I sold the house." Brandon stared at the document in his hands like it was written in a foreign language. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Stephanie snatched the papers from him, her eyes racing across the text. I watched her legal training kick in as she analyzed every clause, every signature, every stamp. The contract was clear and unambiguous. The property located at this address in Carmel by the Sea, California, had been sold to one Diane Morrison for the sum of $3,900,000. The transaction had been completed 5 days prior. All relevant fees and taxes had been paid. The deed had been transferred and recorded with the county. There was also a life estate clause. I, Allen, retained the legal right to reside in the property until my death. Only after I passed away would full ownership transfer to the new owner. "This cannot be legal," Stephanie muttered, flipping through the pages frantically. "There must be something wrong with it, some loophole." "There is no loophole," I said calmly. "Harold Fletcher handled the transaction personally. You might remember him. He has been practicing law for over 40 years. Brandon finally found his voice. "You sold our family home. You actually sold it. It was never your home, Brandon. It was mine. And Margaret's." "To who? Who is Diane Morrison?" Right on cue, the door to the guest room opened. Diane stepped out, her posture straight, her expression calm but firm. "Hello, Brandon," she said. "It has been a while." Brandon's jaw dropped. "Diane, Aunt Margaret's niece." "That is right. And as of last Tuesday, I am the legal owner of this property." Stephanie whirled to face her. You planned this together." Diane walked over to stand beside me. "Uncle Allen reached out to me when he needed help. I was happy to assist. This house meant everything to Aunt Margaret. I intend to preserve it exactly as she would have wanted." Brandon turned on me, his face contorted with rage. "How could you do this? This was supposed to be my inheritance." I met his gaze without flinching. "Inheritance? Brandon, I'm still alive. You were trying to take from me while I'm still breathing. We were trying to help you by threatening to take my grandchildren away, by calling me incompetent, by planning to have me declared mentally unfit." Brandon faltered. He had not realized I knew about the psychiatrist. Stephanie grabbed his arm. "We should go. We will find another way." But Brandon was not ready to give up. He stepped toward me, his fists clenched. "This is not over, old man. I will fight this in court. I will drag it out for years if I have to." Harold emerged from the study carrying his briefcase. "I would advise against that," he said mildly. "The sale was conducted in full compliance with California law. Every document has been notarized and witnessed. If you want to challenge it, be my guest. But I should warn you, the courts do not look kindly on children who try to take property from their elderly parents through coercion." Stephanie paled. She knew Harold was right. Any lawsuit would expose their behavior to public scrutiny. A surgeon and a lawyer caught trying to manipulate a grieving widower. The reputational damage alone would be devastating. "Brandon," she hissed, "we need to leave. Now." But Brandon was not listening. He was staring at something on the wall behind me. The painting. It was the one Margaret had made when Brandon was 10 years old. 3 figures on a beach at sunset. A man, a woman, and a small boy. Our family frozen in a moment of perfect happiness. Brandon's face changed. The anger drained away, replaced by something else, something I had not seen in years. Pain. "Mom painted that," he said softly. "I remember. We spent all day on the beach. She took photographs to work from. I fell asleep in the car on the way home." I felt my chest tighten. "She loved you, Brandon, more than anything in the world." "Then why?" His voice cracked. "Why did she leave everything to you? Why am I being shut out?" "Because she knew. She knew what you would do with the money. She knew you had lost your way, and she was terrified that giving you everything would destroy whatever good was left inside you." Brandon stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the painting. Stephanie tugged at his sleeve, urging him to leave, but he didn't move. "I'm not a bad person," he whispered. "I'm not. I know. Deep down I know, but right now, standing in my living room, threatening to take my home and my grandchildren away from me, this is not the son your mother and I raised." A tear rolled down Brandon's cheek. Stephanie finally managed to pull him toward the door. "Come on, there is nothing more to say here." Brandon stumbled after her, looking back once at the painting before stepping outside. The door closed behind them with a soft click. I slumped back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. Diane knelt beside me, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Are you okay, Uncle Allen?" I nodded slowly. I will be, eventually. Harold gathered his papers and headed for the door. I will file the necessary documents to ensure there is no legal challenge. Call me if they try anything else. After he left, Diane and I sat in silence for a long time. The afternoon light shifted across the room, casting long shadows on the walls. Do you think he will ever change? Diane finally asked. I looked at the painting of my family. I hope so, I said. I really hope so. The weeks that followed were quiet. I fell into a routine. Morning walks on the beach, coffee on the deck, afternoons spent in Margaret's studio looking at her paintings and remembering. Diane returned to Seattle but called every few days to check on me. She promised to visit for Thanksgiving. She also started researching local caretakers who could help with maintenance on the property. Harold filed all the paperwork to ensure the sale was ironclad. He also quietly let it be known in legal circles what Brandon and Stephanie had tried to do. Nothing public, nothing actionable, just enough to make sure they thought twice before trying anything else. I used some of the money from the house sale to establish a foundation in Margaret's name. The Margaret Fletcher Arts Fund would provide grants to young artists pursuing seascape and landscape painting. It was something she would have loved. But through all of this, I could not stop thinking about my grandchildren, Emma and Lucas. I missed them terribly. Their laughter, their questions, their endless energy. I wondered if I would ever see them again. Then, exactly 1 month after that confrontation in my living room, my phone rang. It was Brandon. My heart pounded as I answered. Dad? His voice sounded different, smaller, tired. I am here. Can we talk? I closed my eyes. I am listening. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear Brandon breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, he began. Things have been bad since that day at the house. Stephanie and I have been fighting constantly. She blames me for everything. She says I should have been more aggressive with you. She wanted me to file a lawsuit anyway. What did you tell her? I told her no. I cannot do it, Dad. I cannot drag my own father through court over money. I felt something loosen in my chest. What happened then? She moved out. Went back to her parents in Beverly Hills. She is talking about divorce. I'm sorry, Brandon. Do not be. It was a long time coming. I just could not see it. He paused. She was not a good person, Dad. I think I always knew that. But I ignored it because she was beautiful and successful and everyone was impressed by her. What are you going to do now? I do not know yet. Figure out custody arrangements for the kids. Keep working. Try to be a better person than I have been. And us? What about us? Brandon's voice broke. I'm so sorry, Dad. For everything. I do not know when I became someone who would threaten his own father. I'm ashamed of myself. Tears streamed down my face. Your mother always believed there was good in you, Brandon, even when you made it hard to see. I want to try again, if you will let me. I do not want your money or your house. I just want my father back, and I want my children to know their grandfather. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Come and visit this weekend. Bring Emma and Lucas. We will see where things go from there. 3 days later, Brandon's car pulled into my driveway, but this time he was alone in the front seat. No Stephanie. In the back, 2 small faces pressed against the window, eyes wide with excitement. Grandpa! Emma shrieked as she tumbled out of the car. She ran across the gravel and launched herself into my arms. Lucas followed more cautiously, but his smile was just as bright. Hi, Grandpa. Can we go to the beach? I held them both close, breathing in the scent of shampoo and childhood. We can do anything you want, I told them. Anything at all. Brandon stood by the car, watching. He looked thinner than before. There were dark circles under his eyes, but there was also something different about him, something softer. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder. Welcome home, son. The next few months brought slow but steady change. Brandon and Stephanie finalized their separation. She got the house in Los Angeles and half their savings. Brandon did not fight for more. He said he just wanted peace. He moved into a smaller place near the hospital. He started volunteering at a free clinic on weekends, providing medical care to people who could not afford it. He said it reminded him why he became a doctor in the first place. Every other weekend, he brought Emma and Lucas to visit me. We built sandcastles and flew kites and caught crabs in tide pools. I told them stories about their grandmother, about how she used to paint all day and bake cookies at night, about how she loved the sound of waves more than any music. One afternoon, Emma found the painting of our family on the beach. "Is that Daddy when he was little?" she asked, pointing at the small figure. "Yes, sweetheart, your grandmother painted that. She was really good." Yes, she was. Emma studied the painting seriously. "Grandpa, will you teach me to paint like Grandma?" I knelt down beside her. "I do not know how to paint, sweetheart, but maybe we can learn together." Her face lit up. "Promise? Promise." Brandon stood in the doorway watching us. I caught his eye, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled. A real smile. The first one I had seen from him in years. We were not healed yet, not completely. Some wounds take a long time to close, but we were trying. And that was enough. It has been almost a year now since that day when Brandon came to take my house. I still live here in the home I built for Margaret. Every morning I wake up to the sound of waves. Every evening I watch the sunset over the Pacific. The life estate arrangement means I will stay here until my final breath, just like I promised her. The healing did not happen overnight. For weeks after Brandon apologized, I would still wake up in the middle of the night replaying that confrontation in my head, the way he had looked at me, the way Stephanie had smiled while threatening me, the cold, calculated cruelty of it all. But gradually the pain faded. Not because I forgot what happened, but because new memories started to take its place. Emma learning to swim in the ocean, Lucas catching his first fish off the pier, Brandon showing up one Saturday with tools offering to help me fix the deck railing. We do not talk about that day anymore. We do not need to. The lesson has been learned. The boundaries have been set. What matters now is what we build going forward. I have come to understand something important through all of this. Forgiveness does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means choosing to move forward anyway. It means recognizing that people can change, that the son who betrayed me is the same son who now calls every week just to say hello. Margaret would be proud, I think, not just of me, but of Brandon too. She always said he had a good heart somewhere deep inside. It just took almost losing everything for him to find it again. Last month I went up to her studio and stood in front of her unfinished painting. It was the last piece she was working on before she got too sick to hold a brush. A family portrait of sorts. 4 generations gathered on a beach. Grandparents, parents, children, and what looks like the beginning of a grandchild. She never got to finish it. The faces are barely sketched in. The colors are muted and incomplete. But looking at it now, I think I understand what she was trying to say. Some pictures are not meant to be completed by one person. The rest of the story is for us to live, not to paint. Through the window, I can see Brandon down on the beach with Emma and Lucas. They are building something in the sand. It looks like a castle, or maybe a house. I smile. The greatest inheritance I can leave my grandchildren is not a house or money. It is the knowledge that family is worth fighting for, even when it breaks your heart. It is the understanding that love means setting boundaries, not just opening doors. It is the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go. Margaret taught me all of that. And now, in whatever years I have left, I will try to pass those lessons on. If you are watching this, and you have family members who have treated you unfairly, I want you to know something. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to say no, even to the people you love most. But you also have the choice to leave a door open, not for their sake, but for yours, because carrying anger is exhausting, because bitterness poisons the one who holds it, because life is too short to spend it fighting with the people who should matter most. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who tried to take advantage of you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this channel. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We share stories like this every week. Stories about real people facing real challenges. Stories about love and betrayal and forgiveness and hope. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Maybe a friend going through a tough time with family. Maybe a parent who feels unappreciated. Maybe someone who just needs to know they are not alone. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you found something in it that helps you in your own life. May your families be sources of strength, not pain. May your homes be filled with love, not conflict. And may you always have the courage to protect what matters most, even when it costs you everything. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, the best inheritance you can leave is not money, it is love.